Hello, and thanks for joining us for our 2021-23 operating capital budget rollouts. I'll turn it over to the members for some opening remarks, and then they'll be happy to answer all your questions. So, Senator Rolfes, would you like to get us started?
Yes, thank you, Aaron. Hi, I'm Senator Christine Rolfes. I represent the 23rd Legislative District, which is Bainbridge Island, Kingston, Bremerton, Poulsbo, the north and central part of the Kitsap Peninsula. And I have the privilege of being the chair of the Senate's Ways and Means Committee this year, and so one of the lead budget writers. And I wanted to begin with some opening remarks and then turn it over to Vice Chairs Robinson and Fry for their comments, and then we will open it up for questions. But I wanted to start with just an introductory statement. Right about now at 1 o'clock, we are releasing our $59.2 billion two-year budget proposal for this state for the next 2 years. And we're able to leverage that $59.2 billion state budget with over $7 billion in federal funds that are coming to us from Congress. And there are a lot of numbers involved. We can throw a lot of numbers around, and we probably will later today. But I want to talk about what's in this truly historic and ambitious budget that will impact the lives of Washingtonians and make a difference in our lives. I firmly believe that the budget is strategic, and it's going to help us not just with recovery, but with strengthening us, with providing resilience as we grow our way out of this pandemic. So I want to start by saying, for every person in this state who is still waiting and hoping for a vaccine, this budget provides more than $1 billion to keep staving off the virus and make sure we can deliver those vaccines efficiently across the state throughout the spring and summer. For any family who's struggling to find childcare for their kids so they can get back to work, we make historic investments in the childcare system in this state. These were necessary investments before the pandemic, and they're really critical to getting our economy rolling again. For families struggling just with basic essentials, this budget strengthens our safety net, and it puts more money into the pockets of working families through the Working Families Tax Credits and through a meaningful investment in the Paid Family Medical Leave Act for people who need to leave work to take care of family members. For small business owners who are worried about the upcoming unemployment tax rate increases, we have set aside $500 million for rate relief. That should impact most small businesses across the state. For school district administrators, teachers, school board members, and parents who are worried about the financial stability of our schools because enrollment dropped so precipitously, this budget provides the funds to stabilize the schools so that they can be fully staffed next year. If you're a parent worried, or a grandparent worried about your kids falling behind, we're providing millions in grants to community organizations for summer and after school programs that will help the most at-risk kids get back on track. And we're supporting older students who may need an extra year to graduate successfully. For individuals with developmental disabilities and their families who support them, who have been waiting for years to receive services, this budget completely funds the wait list so that every individual can have access to the life-changing tools that they deserve. For communities across the state who may have lost trust in law enforcement officials, this budget provides for a sweeping set of police accountability reforms. And for law enforcement officers, we have your back with behavioral health and substance use treatment investments for those with whom you have frequent contact. For communities across the state who worry about wildfire threats starting this spring and going through the summer, this budget massively increases protection and prevention efforts. For the thousands of our neighbors who don't have stable roofs over their heads, this budget will distribute $850 million for affordable housing, rental assistance, and grants to cities for shelters. For our immigrant neighbors who pay taxes and contribute to the economy, but who have been left out of state and federal assistance programs, more grant funding will be coming for your families to help you recover. For Washingtonians who like to escape for adventure, refuge, and peace in our state parks, this summer, we will have a system of parks that is staffed to serve you for the first time in decades. And for communities who have suffered the most from environmental pollution and environmental health disparities, this budget makes key investments to start the hard work of implementing the principles of environmental justice. And for the overall health and well-being of everybody in this state, young and old, there are historic investments in this budget that Senator Robinson will provide more details on. But we make enormous progress in everything from crisis response to caring for our seniors and strengthening our public health system. We're fortunate right now to have a resilient economy that has brought revenue into the state more than we thought we would have last June, but about the same amount that we thought we'd have a year ago. We're on track. We're on track for recovery. We're on track for continuing the policies that we adopted and have been building on for the last few years. But we have a robust operating budget, and we can do that in part because we have funds from our partners in the federal government through the American Rescue Plan. Those funds have been life-saving, literally life-saving support over the last year. And so, like any family who's sitting down to create a budget, we made strategic investments, but we also are paying down long-standing obligations, and we're leaving healthy reserves in place to guard against an emergency and unknowns. We all know that what we have before us with this pandemic is a lot of unknowns. So we've left $1 billion in reserves as well. And finally, before I turn it over to Senator Robinson, I want to say that I want to give my thanks to the people who have been writing, who have been testifying, who we're going to be hearing from more in the next few weeks. This has been an extraordinary legislative session entirely online. We have heard voices from around the state that we never have heard from before. We've had people visiting from living rooms, bedrooms, kitchens, and home offices, telling us about their struggles, their needs, and their hopes. And in this online session, I want to say that we heard you. This budget reflects what we heard, and I'm really proud of it. Senator Robinson.
Thank you, Senator Rolfes. I'm June Robinson, state senator from the 38th district, and proud to be one of the vice chairs of the Senate Ways and Means Committee. And it's been my privilege to work alongside of Senator Rolfes as we craft this year's operating budget. And echoing her comments, I want to say that this is a bold and equitable budget that invests in the recovery of that our state badly needs at this time, as we have come through a very challenging year with the coronavirus pandemic. This budget will keep money flowing through our communities and meet the needs that our neighbors have been telling us about. It sends targeted relief to schools, to parents, to businesses, to elders, to folks with housing insecurity, to people living with disabilities, and to our healthcare and public health systems who are needing a boost. It provides economic resilience and sets us on an equitable path for the future. Specifically, I am very proud of a historic investment in our foundational public health system. That's our local and state public health needs around the state. We are investing $150 million in the first biennium and $450 million over the next 4 years in foundational public health for the state of Washington. We have not seen that type of investment in local public health in our state's history, and I'm really proud to be a part of it at a time when we know it is desperately needed. In addition, there is behavioral health funding, as Senator Rolfe has talked about. We received funding through a settlement of the opioid crisis, and we're reinvesting that money back into addressing substance use disorder. There is $50 million in this biennium of Medicaid increases for dentists, for adult dental care, for pediatricians, and for behavioral health providers, much needed to address the needs of folks who rely on Medicaid for their health care in our state. There's also $100 million to be able to reduce the costs of people who buy individual health plans on the Washington Health Benefit Exchange, which will make healthcare much more affordable for those folks. There's $454 million to increase rates for nursing homes and long-term care. There's $30 million, as Senator Rolfe has talked about, to eliminate the developmental disabilities wait list, and $50 million into a flexible trust account for the DD community to be able to invest. We also support our friends and neighbors who are struggling with housing insecurity by providing $850 million in federal money for rental assistance, and $44 million to address landlord tenant issues, so that if someone does need to go to court to address a possible eviction, that they will be represented by an attorney in that court proceeding. So I think that's a really important policy and budget investment that we're making to shore up our affordable housing and people who are just in desperate need of housing assistance at this time. So those are some of the high level top line issues that we are addressing in this budget that really help Washingtonians in every community around the state deal with the current reality, the hard year that we've been through, and being able to look forward into the future and into an equitable recovery. Senator Frocht is now going to speak to investments in the capital budget.
Thank you, Senator Robinson. Thank you, Senator Rolfes. My name is David Frocht. I'm a state senator from the 46th district, which is North Seattle, Lake Forest Park, and Kenmore. And I am vice chair of the Ways and Means Committee with primary responsibility for the capital budget. The capital budget this year is a $6.2 billion budget, so it's about 10% of the size of the operating budget. This particular budget is, if it's passed, if this one were to pass, would be the largest in the state's history. It's 25% more investment than what we did in the 2019-21 cycle, and it would build on priority infrastructure across the state, primarily by expanding broadband internet access, growing our affordable housing, safeguarding our natural resources, and creating a new community relief fund to invest in underserved communities that have been disinvested in over a long period of time. I think that we are making investments in every project, in every area of the state that will make us stronger and more equitable and lead to more jobs and more economic recovery, which was the primary goal that we set out to do. And that's something that Governor Inslee provided to us in his draft budget proposal earlier this year. That was a key recommendation that he had, and we have, I think, followed through with that in a significant way. The budget includes funds to improve our environmental health with $389 million for recreation, conservation, salmon recovery. We are continuing to fund the first new state park in, I think, 30 years in the Nisqually State Park. And we also have a really strong investment of $86 million for renovation and maintenance of our state parks, which I know is really important to so many people. They've utilized the state parks during the pandemic and will continue to do so. We make a record $315 million investment in affordable housing grants and loans through the largest ever investment in the Housing Trust Fund of $205 million, and also what I would believe is an innovative $90 million rapid housing acquisition program, which I think can specifically help Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia, and other locations around the state where we have crisis of unsheltered people, to help those communities build out more housing quickly and to try to get people sheltered and in housing as quickly as possible. And so that's the goal of this rapid housing fund. And finally, I'll just make a point that we continue to make our behavioral health investments really, really important. In particular, we build on our policy direction from 2019 and to 21, providing more space in the community for those who need short and long-term behavioral health care. We invest in numerous facilities around the state, and in particular, we continue to make the landmark investment of $191 million into the University of Washington's new behavioral health teaching facility hospital. And that is going to be, I think, extremely important. We make strong investments of almost $1 billion in our public schools, and over $1 billion, 1.5 to be exact, in our higher education system. Not only creating jobs by building the state community and technical college system with more STEM and technical related buildings, but doing that as well at a number of our universities, including Washington State, University of Washington, Eastern Washington, Western Washington, really trying to build out the capacity for our state to create and provide a workforce of more engineers, more computer scientists, and those in the technical fields that we know our business community is asking for. So those are some of the highlights of the capital budget, and I think it's a really, really strong one. And it builds, I think, nicely and fits nicely in with the direction of our operating budget.
Great, thank you. Now we'll take some questions. First, we'll go to Rachel LaCourte with the Associated Press. Rachel, go ahead.
Hi, for Senator Rolfes, given that the capital gains tax will face a court challenge if signed into law, why include it within this budget and not as a standalone as you've done in previous years?
Well, in previous years, we hadn't passed it in the Senate, and this year we passed it in the Senate, and it's the Senate practice to book revenue that we passed. So what we did was structure it so that it could be standalone. The revenue from the capital gains tax is booked the second year in this budget for child care, as well as it's being directed into a taxpayer fairness account. And if it doesn't withstand a court challenge, we'll come back and revisit the taxpayer relief and the child care programs that we've earmarked for it.
Rachel, do you have a follow?
If the House, I know it's up for a vote, the capital gains tax is up for a vote before the House. If they do add an emergency clause back on there, do you think it would be difficult for the Senate to pass that bill again?
Sen Robinson, would you like to address that question?
We will pass whatever the House sends back to us.
Okay. Next, we'll go to Joe O'Sullivan with the Seattle Times. Joe, go ahead.
I have two questions, so I'll ask them both now for Senator Rolfes. Given how unpredictable the economy and tax collections have been the past year, why not spend a little bit less and keep a little more in the rainy day fund? And when we're talking about the federal dollars, there's $1.7 billion in there for schools. Is that all from the latest coronavirus package, or is that includes some money from previous packages?
Okay, taking the second question first. The 1.7 billion is the latest federal relief package. Does that clarify what your question was on that one, Joe?
Yes.
Okay, and then in terms of leaving reserves, we left $1 billion in reserves between the rainy day fund and ending fund balance in this biennium. Additionally, we still have $2.3 billion in federal one-time funds that we have not tapped into. So we have the federal funds are usable through 2024. So we've left about a little over $3 billion on the table in the event of uncertainty, essentially.
Joe, are you set? You have a follow?
All set, thanks.
Great. Next, we'll go to Austin Jenkins of Northwest News Network. Austin, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Senator Rolfes, I'd like you to kind of compare and contrast the response to this recession compared to the Great Recession, and sort of the philosophy that's motivating this additional spending. And kind of playing off of Joe's question, I get the sense that your argument is that you have an opportunity to sort of inject a bunch of money into the economy right now, and that could be good for recovery, but that's typically not been the role of the state. You have that opportunity because you have the money on hand, but I think there might be people out there who would say, oof, it seems like too much spending, too much growth too quickly. Maybe you should be a little more conservative.
Well, this recession is really, really different than the Great Recession. And the jobs, I think the job loss is even different if you compare to different recessions. So what we see with this economic situation right now is the lowest paid workers in the state, as well as families, communities of color, people who have traditionally been or historically been economically disadvantaged are the hardest hit right now. And that's an area that state government excels in. We are good at providing services for people who need them and good at getting people back on their feet. And so it's very appropriate, I think, for us to be using the resources that we have to help working families take care of their children, to invest in childcare so people can get back to work, and to the healthcare investments that Senator Robinson touched on are not just investments, they're necessary. We have nursing homes closing throughout the state. We have hospitals that are claiming bankruptcy. We have doctors and dentists who won't see sick children who are on Medicaid because the state doesn't pay them enough. So just to get us back on our feet requires investment. Secondly, I think for those of you who have been tracking the revenue forecasts over the last year, it was really clear. It's really clear to any of us involved that the federal stimulus money that has come in has been buoying people. It's a lifeline. And that has certainly contributed to the revenue forecast that we have today. And so I think continuing to use federal funds in that way while we're still in this recovery aspect is very appropriate. I think we've seen it's a smart investment.
Austin is telling me that he doesn't have a follow-up, so we will next go to Laurel Demkovich with the spokesman review. Laurel, go ahead.
Thanks, Aaron. On the federal funds, I know that you're not using all of them, at least in that like flexible 4 whatever billion. So can you talk about why, I guess, you're not planning to use all of them in this budget, where they will go, when you might start those conversations again?
Those are because actually back to Austin's question, I think we wanted to leave some money on the table in case of uncertainty, because of uncertainty, and that those funds can be flexibly used to address COVID recovery, and they're pretty flexible. So by just keeping them off the table, we are allowing ourselves some breathing room to see how the economy goes and how school reopening goes, how child care reopening goes, and just how the economy opens.
Laurel, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, on the forest health funding, I know that some lawmakers, Commissioner France, have asked for a dedicated account for that, but this seems to be coming just from the general fund. So can you talk about that decision to do it that way?
Yeah, a couple of things. First is we do have an account in Senator Frock's budget that is dedicated to forest health. So we're covering our bases with an account, but the Senate hasn't passed the bill that sets up the account, and we haven't fully vetted the idea of giving unrestricted hundreds of millions of dollars to the Department of Natural Resources without appropriation authority. So we're still figuring out on the Senate side how we're going to structure that funding. But I think the main thing is that the funding is there. I'm hoping it's there in the House as well. But the main thing is that we have it. And so when we work with the House to merge our budgets, we can figure out the best way, whether we set up a dedicated account or we just fund it. The second thing, Laurel, is we're not relying on a new tax to fund an account. So there's no dedicated revenue. We're just saying we have enough money in the general fund, and we believe that we will continue to have it, that we can fund these efforts sustainably over the next decade.
Okay, and up next, we will go to Melissa Santos at Crosscut. Melissa, go ahead.
Hi there. We've heard a lot of talk about making the state's tax system more fair, sort of when, on the Senate floor, when we're talking about the capital gains tax and such. And I know that some of the money from that goes toward the working families tax credit, but was there thought given to reducing other taxes that lower income people pay, like doing a reduction in the sales tax or a reduction in property taxes or anything like that, given that frankly, there's a lot of money that is available now?
I'll start and then I'll turn it over to Senator Robinson. One of the biggest investments in our budget is buying down the unemployment rates, which is not, that's tax relief because taxes are going up and we're trying to stop them from going up in the system that we have. But that is one of our bigger expenditures, is trying to provide some relief for small businesses through that fund. And Senator Robinson, do you want to address that question?
Sure. I mean, passing the capital gains tax is a step towards rewriting our upside down tax code, and then using some of that revenue that we expect to get from that new tax to fund a working families tax credit is another piece of that. We are choosing to use other revenue to invest in childcare and early learning, which is an investment for people so that they can go to work. And women who have left the workforce might be able to go back to work and back into the workforce to bolster our state's economy. So it's a balance of relief or reform and important investments that strengthen our overall economy. And as I said, it is a first step, and we know that we need to take more steps, but we had to begin with this first step this year.
Melissa, do you have a follow?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, I don't fully understand the money that looks like it's going toward health, health insurance and sort of either reducing people's premiums, maybe. Can you talk, or maybe Senator Fry, can you talk a little bit about, it looks like there's an investment in actual health insurance costs being lowered for people. Am I misreading that?
Well, I'll let Senator Robinson speak to that, and then I can add anything.
Yeah, we're investing $100 million a biennium in premium assistance. So people who buy individual health insurance coverage on the health benefit exchange, in addition to the federal assistance that was just released in the last package out of Congress, we're able to wrap more funding around that to lower the cost of healthcare for those folks who don't have it any other way and are currently buying on the exchange individual plans. Senator Frock probably can give you more details, but that's the summary of what we're doing.
Yeah. I'll just add kind of big picture. The idea of state subsidies for those purchasing health insurance on the individual exchange was part of our Cascade Care bill 2 years ago, which set up a version of the public option in Washington State. And we've been working through the public option, but we did some serious work over the interim and looking at how we could bring more people into the pool through this mechanism. And by lowering premiums for people, more people sign up, the risk pool gets better, and it brings down premiums overall across the entire spectrum of people who are buying on the individual market. And because of the pandemic, with so many people losing employer-sponsored coverage, this is really a vital lifeline. And then, as Senator Robinson said, with the Biden administration proposing the additional subsidies at the federal subsidy level, I think there is the possibility, if all of these things come together, of really seeing significant reductions in premiums for people who are purchasing on the individual market. And so I think that's really, really important.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's the end of the questions. So I will turn it back over to the members for some closing remarks. Senator Rolfes.
Okay, I guess I can't believe those were all the questions. It took so long to write that budget. In closing, this budget is this budget is an important document. It's an important blueprint for the state's future. This budget spends a lot of money. Our state budgets always spend a lot of money, but this money is being used to stabilize our economy, to stabilize our healthcare system, to stabilize our schools, to stabilize our environment, and to stabilize the working families of our state, and strategically bring us out of this pandemic into a strong recovery and into a more resilient state. I'm really proud of the investments that we've made, the care that we've taken to make sure that this budget is sustainable over the long term. And I also want to address that we listened to our Republican colleagues, and I heard their priorities, and we have priorities in this budget. We are investing in things in this budget that hit all four corners of the state and that meet the priorities of Washingtonians as a whole, whether that's fire prevention, whether that's massive investments in broadband expansion, whether that's stabilizing our public school system, whether that's getting health care to people that need it the most, from our infants to our oldest residents. This budget makes sustainable strategic investments that are going to benefit all of us. But thank you for joining us today.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. We will see you next week. Bye.